Salutations, Ranting Engineer back for a special episode. I'm going to talk a little bit about COVID-19. I'm also trying a little bit different setup here. My little sister was giving me shit about how some of the video angles were kind of terrible and some of the lighting, so we're going to try this. All right, COVID-19. Specifically, what do we want to talk about? Perturbations in the system. Fun place to start. You put a perturbation in the system, essentially something's got to give. You've got to have some reaction, dampening. Something is going to happen in the system. And that's how we're going to relate it to this COVID-19. I'm also going to give you a bunch of information that really is hard to refute, but we got to put it together and interpret it in a way to come up with something. In the end, I'm going to pass it on to you as my viewer. What do you think? So let's start off with this. Why are we doing social distancing, masks, lockdowns, etc., everything else? Well, the provincial government, and I guess the federal government, but the provincial government said that they are trying to limit impact on the medical system. So the amount of people that get infected can be directly correlated to a certain ratio of those ending up in the hospital and another ratio of that ending up in the ICUs. In recent times, the ICUs have been filling up. So we know it's a decent metric. If your medical system's overwhelmed, you can't, with COVID types, you can't respond to general stuff, general surgeries, people in accidents, heart attacks, etc., etc. So that's their mandate, and it makes sense. So people that are coming along and saying, "Oh, we need to open up the economy," you're not wrong, because there's potential long-term effects. But we got to look at it this way: what is the least damage long-term effect? We've got a perturbation in the system. We've got COVID. It's come in here. Something has got to give. So what is that thing that's going to give? So what we do know. Actually, I'll back up. There's a bunch of people ranting online, and a couple of my sister's friends are saying, but only 1% of the population is going to be affected by this. Open up the economy. You're not incorrect. However, you're not looking at the deeper picture, and the deeper picture is this. That 1% is mostly made up of people 60 plus, and that age group worldwide, because you can look at the data and you can't argue with it, is getting brutalized. Not by increases in percentages over previous years, over by factors. Alberta alone, the factor is greater than 4. Not up by 4%, up by 400% over previous years. So yes, if we open up the economy and we don't have safeguards in place, we know two things based on the data. The amount of people that end in hospital is going to increase. We know that. It's a direct ratio. More people infected, higher ratio of people in the hospital, because a certain percentage will be that sick, which means a greater percentage could impact our ICUs. You can't argue that. It's already been shown in Canada, not that I'm looking at the States much, overseas, Denmark, because Denmark's done a hell of a good job sciencing the shit out of this. Same thing with Taiwan. So if we're looking at that metric, and it's a good metric, we are trying to protect those that are most vulnerable. Now, there will be some, we'll call them outliers. There's a handful of people that are in the lower age range, under 50, that with pre-existing conditions that can be impacted by this. They do exist. There's not a lot of them. So there's a certain risk, a bit of Russian roulette. So let's look at this from different standpoints. And some of these will be controversial, but I pose to you that none of them from a technical level are incorrect. We got to figure out what's the best. So if I look at strictly from a scientific standpoint of survival of the fittest, I'll say Darwinism, but survival of the fittest, you know what? Let this thing run rampant. Whoever dies, dies. They weren't fit enough to survive. And overall, as a society, as a species of human beings, we will be stronger because the ones that survived this COVID survived it. Now, as my dad says, it's a bit of a baby boomer killer. The problem with that is if we let things go, we know the ICUs will get slammed. They'll get overwhelmed, which means other people will be affected, because if you're treating all this COVID types, then you don't have the ICUs for other things. That's difficult. However, if you really want to go absolutely no emotion on it, if you get COVID, you don't have access to treatment. That's controversial. But from a strict standpoint of survival of the fittest, it matches that model. Let this thing go, kills who it kill. Could kill me, could kill a couple of my kids, could kill my parents. And like my dad was saying, this is a baby boomer killer. So That's why the current mitigations are in place. People that argue they're draconian or not, based on the metric of limiting the amount of people in ICU, it's absolutely solid. It really is. So now we get to me as a father. I've got two kids, as I might have mentioned in previous videos, that have immunity compromise. They have problems. One of them especially. So as a father, I'm like, I don't want him, my youngest son, I don't want him infected because there is a potential risk that he could die. That's me as a father. So I'm like, how do I protect him? Okay. Well, the lockdowns are meant to protect him on the most part, but we know because this thing is so contagious. And the variants that are coming out are more contagious, not necessarily more deadly, just more contagious. The risk for him is high. I've got to keep him isolated, and that's essentially what he's doing. So then if I look at this as a person of faith, it's, guess what? Your time is up. The Lord says it's time for you to go home, and this COVID is just the way that you're going to get wiped out. So some people, when they look at the human approach, it's like, we want to protect, we want to do the lockdowns, okay? I'm not arguing whether masks, distancing, and lockdowns are effective. I'm looking at the methodology of the metric they're doing it against. So, for those people that want to open up the economy, okay, it is hard to argue that that will put the 60 plus at risk. So it comes down to you, to the person that's watching this. How do we protect those most vulnerable? Because as humans, that's what we want to do. We pay into a medical system. We have the expectation that medical system should help us. Okay, we have people that are a certain part of the demographic of society that is getting absolutely brutalized. This, so knowing all the information, knowing your approach, you are now Jason Kenney, and you have to make the right call. That's my point. So a lot of people that are out there yapping all like this, a lot of you need to shut the fuck up. Because I doubt any one of you is going to stand in front of there as the role of Jason Kenney with 4.5 million people that you're trying to do and try to do the right thing. I hate politicians, but when I saw him struggling up there, I realized he was having a hard time with what to do. Do we open up? Do we open up? Do we close down? Do we do all these restrictions? Now, are the restrictions uniform and well? No, that's a different conversation. I think they messed up on that. But the idea of a lockdown to limit, to slow down the propagation of this COVID-19 critter of infecting people, to assure that only a certain amount are affected, so that only a certain amount are in the hospital, that actually has a fundamental, very good basis to it. Again, can't argue it. So back to you is, what do we do? What is your solution? It's easy to say, open up the economy, open up this. So it comes down to, if we were to open up everything, okay, and assuming that we don't have inoculations in place, how many people are going to die? Okay, we know it's the 60 plus, it's a factored value. We know overall it's much higher than the previous years. What we don't know is by shutting down the economy, by locking people in, we're going to lose people to suicides. We're going to have crime go up. We don't have a fundamental, strong basis to move forward of what is the least impact. What's got to give? Something's got to give. People have to die, whether it's directly because of COVID, or people are going to end up dying because of economic suicide, something else. What is that lower number? Okay. I don't think there's anybody that watches this, anyone out there can say with a definitive answer, what is the right way of going forward. Now, backing off of that, what I think is we need to inoculate those 60 plus. We need to inoculate whoever wants it to, the ones that are at most critical, the ones that usually have underlying problems that this critter really kind of picks on, okay? But the last thing is when you put this all together, those people that are arguing so hard we must open the economy, you're not wrong, but you got to think about the downside. Those that are in lockdown, we're talking about, well, we think there's a downside. However, we've put a perturbation in the system. Something has to give because you cannot have zero net effect. So those people, just to be a prick, Those people that say we have to open the economy, it's only going to affect 1% of the population. I put all the information together, put the data, and assuming that they're my age or younger, I stand in front of them and say, that's okay. Who are you going to give up to die for the cause? And it mostly stops them. It's like, well, opening up the economy is going to cause deaths because of propagation of this. Are you willing to give up your parents? Am I willing to give up one of my children who might be susceptible to this? I'm not saying he gets it, he's going to die, but the risk is there. Let you think about that. And so now after all this, you are Jason Kenney. You're at the top, 4.5 million people. You make the call. And guess what? Now you're in the firing line. I don't think I would want to be there. I have my own opinions and ideas, but now I'm in charge of 4.5 million people. Have a good night.